Yes. We're just waiting for NBC to give us a green light.
Okay.
My team is ready. It's just NBC that still need to go live. A blessed morning to you, the lovely GIC viewers and listeners within and beyond the borders of the Republic of Namibia. A very warm welcome to your Monday morning edition of the Office's Ministries and Agencies Information Sharing Session. Coming to you live from the Government Information Center studio here in the heart of the nation's capital. For this morning's episode, I will be your host, Helene Felipe Samunyela. It's an absolute pleasure being back on your screens. Now for this morning, we are commemorating World Wetlands Day, observed annually on the 2nd of February. And we turn our focus on an area that is often quite overlooked, but critically an important part of our environment, our wetlands. And it's under the theme Protecting Wetlands Through Indigenous Knowledge. We will then be exploring how these ecosystems support our climate resilience, biodiversity, as well as our community livelihood. And of course, why their protection is a shared responsibility. Now, joining me in the studio this morning is Mr. Kenneth Wiseb. He's the Deputy Director of Wildlife Monitoring and Research within the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism. And he's here to help us unpack Namibia's efforts in conserving these vital nature resources. Mr. Wiseb, good morning once again and welcome to the Government Information Center.
Good morning. And thank you for having me here.
All right. Now, I'd just like to, make a brief invitation, as I may put it. It is just to say that here at the GIC, our viewers and listeners form an integral part of this platform. And to that effect, I would like to pause here and extend a warm invitation to you, Namibia, to be part of this conversation by following the discussion on our social media platforms, where we are currently streaming this show live. Now on Facebook, we are at the Government Information Center in Namibia. Alternatively, you can also stream us live on our YouTube channel, and we are at the Government Information Center. Now, as we kickstart the discussion this morning, Mr. Clisop, I just would like to find out from you, actually for the benefit of our viewers and listeners who aren't quite familiar with the term wetland. Briefly talk to us about what World Wetland Day is and why it is important for Namibia to celebrate or commemorate such.
Thank you. I must start with a brief explanation as to what a wetland is.
Right.
Wetland is any piece of land that has water or that contains water. So this can be on permanent basis or it can be on temporary basis. And this piece of land that is inundated with water provides basic ecosystem services on a short-term or on a long-term basis. So that is basically a wetland, and there are some wetlands that provide or that are internationally important because they are important for the migratory bird species. That's the first sort of criteria that defines the importance of wetlands.
Okay.
So World Wetlands Day is an international day on which the global community come together to celebrate wetlands as important ecosystems and important resources that are important for our survival.
Right.
So 2nd of February 1971, that's when the Ramsar Convention was formally adopted in a city called Ramsar in the country called Iran.
Right.
So the convention is named after the city in which it was adopted. And it's all about wetland conservation. And it's the first or the oldest convention or multilateral agreement that deals with environmental issues. And this one is unique in that it is dealing specifically with wetland ecosystem, with a specific ecosystem. So wetlands are very important for a country like Namibia, as you may know and as the viewers may know. Namibia is a very arid country.
Right.
In some circles, we are said to be the most arid country south of the Sahara.
Right.
So Namibia and Botswana are kind of competing for that most arid position in Southern Africa. So we are a very dry country. So
Right.
every drop of water counts and is important. Our communities, most of our communities depends on water, and this water is coming from underground sources. But before this water gets to these underground or become an underground resource, it must come through these wetland systems. So we depend so much on these wetlands for our livelihoods, for our livestock, for our farming activities, and it forms an important part of our existence. Without these wetlands and water resources, will make it hard for us to survive in Namibia. So wetlands are very important, and we have to work together to look after these wetland resources.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Clisop, for that, background of what wetlands actually entails. Thank you. Now, we know that Namibia is also part of the global community that is currently measure the health and effective of its Ramsar listed wetlands. And of course, now measuring the health also means that being aware of the pressure that they face. Would like to find out, what is the biggest threat facing Namibia's wetlands today? And how is the ministry responding to such challenges?
Thank you. There are a number of threats, and I would think the biggest one is climate change. You know, climate change comes with challenges, and it's very unpredictable. So with climate change, the biggest issue that we have observed over the last 15 years is the recurrent droughts.
Right.
So recurrent and also prolonged droughts. So normally we will have, say, a short period of dry period that will last for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then we will have a wet cycle that will last for 8 to 10 years.
Okay.
In the last couple of years, that has changed, and we have more dry spells than we normally used to have.
Okay.
So that is negatively impacting on our wetlands. So our wetlands are also dependent on the rainfall. So the rainfall patterns are impacted or influenced, and that impacts negatively also on the wetlands.
Okay.
So the biggest challenge that we have is the global climate change.
Okay.
So that one really, as Namibia and as a developing country, it's a little bit out of our control to really deal with climate change. We have to find ways to mitigate the impacts of climate change, and that is by being responsible citizens, responsibly managing our wetland resources with the potential impacts of climate change at our backs,
Okay.
or at the backs of our minds.
Right.
So climate change is the biggest threat. I think the development, Namibia is a developing country, so the development pressure as well as the growing human population is also putting pressures on our wetland resources.
Okay.
So we are increasingly facing the risk of pollution, wetland pollution and degradation. So once the wetlands are polluted and degraded, it's very expensive to rehabilitate or restore them for them to continue to provide us those ecosystem services. So those would be the three key main threats that I would think of in terms of pressures that the wetlands are facing in Namibia.
All right. Now, I may probably be asking, right, on behalf of many Namibians out there that want to know an example of a wetland area here in Namibia. What are some of those areas that are identified as wetland in Namibia?
Okay, in Namibia, we have 5 areas that are officially listed as Ramsar sites.
Okay.
So those are Ramsar sites or wetlands of international importance. Of course, there are many other wetlands that are also important for our local communities and for Namibians.
But these ones are
these 5
internationally.
are listed because they meet those internationally set criteria
Right.
to be defined as wetlands of international importance.
All right.
So we have the Edosa Pan.
Okay.
So that is, it's dry most of the time.
Right.
But when we experience good rainfalls and waters flowing in from Angola, they all end up in Edosa Pan.
Right.
So that's one. Then we have the free coastal wetlands.
Okay.
That's the Walvis Bay Lagoon.
Right.
Then we have the Sandwich Harbor, also along not far from Walvis Bay.
Right.
And then we have the Orange River mouth.
Okay.
So those three coastal wetlands plus Edosa, and then we have the newest Ramsar site, which is the lower parts of the Kavango River, which is
Right.
within the Boabada National Park.
Okay.
So those are the 5 Ramsar sites for Namibia, and we are in the process of identifying more others. There are at least 4 other Ramsar or sites that qualify to be listed as Ramsar sites.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Klisa, thank you so much for educating me and the rest of the Namibians that did not know about those 5 sites, the Ramsar sites, wetlands. Now, as the Ramsar focal person, because I understand you are for Namibia, how does Namibia currently measure the health and effectiveness of the Ramsar listed wetlands? Pardon me.
Okay. Fortunately for Namibia, all of the 5 or the 4 out of the 5 Ramsar sites are located within protected areas.
Right.
So Ramsar site is in Edosa National Park, and then the Orange River mouth is located within the Chouklip National Park, and then Sandwich Harbor is in the Skeleton Coast National Park. So in the other one, the lower Okavango Ramsar site is in the Boabada National Park. So these sites are managed as integral parts of these protected areas. So they are protected against all forms of human pressures.
Right.
So they are protected, they are zoned in the management plans of these protected areas as areas of special high value. So they have a highest category of protection, and activities within those sites are really restricted and they are managed. And then we work together with the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Land Reform when it comes to managing water-related resources. So wetlands, water forms integral part of the wetlands, and Ministry of Agriculture, Water, Fisheries and Land Reform is responsible for water quality monitoring. So they conduct water quality monitoring activities at these Ramsar sites, while we also do monitoring of the ecological integrity of these Ramsar sites by using birds or migratory bird species or wetland bird species as indicators. So every year, twice in a year, in summer and in winter, we do wetland bed counts just to get an idea of how the quality of these Ramsar sites are and whether they are still being used by these migratory bird species.
Okay.
So those are the measures that we put in place to make sure that these Ramsar sites in Namibia are effectively managed and protected.
Right. Thank you for that. Now, beyond environmental protection, wetlands are also deeply connected to our natural heritage and biodiversity. How do wetlands perhaps contribute to wildlife conservation and biodiversity monitoring in Namibia?
Thank you. Wetlands are unique ecosystems, so they support unique form of biodiversity. That's now the biodiversity that is adapted to living in those aquatic environments. So they, like I said before, they are important areas for migratory wetland bird species. So birds stop over at these places during their annual migrations for feeding purposes. We have wetlands providing other biodiversity, like things that communities depend on. For instance, fish is an important biodiversity or biological resource provided by the wetlands. We have resources like crocodiles. Of course, they are causing human-wildlife conflict,
Right.
but they are also important components of these wetland ecosystems. We have things like the hippo. As much as they cause problems and sometimes are involved in loss of life, they are important resources. They are important in that they sort of attract tourists to these wetland areas, and then tourism also then generates much needed resources for the country and also for the local communities. So there are diverse forms of biodiversity, some uniquely adapted to those local areas, some endemic to those specific wetland or water bodies. And those are the biodiversity that we help protect, because they are not just unique for the sense or important for the sense of functioning of the biological systems, but they are also important because communities depend on those resources for their livelihoods.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, Mr. Kusab. It is very highly appreciated.
Yeah.
Now, Namibia, if you are just tuning in, you are tuned into an Officers, Ministries and Agencies information sharing session. It is for the Monday episode, that is. And I am your host, Heleni Felepo-Samumela. As earlier mentioned, I am joined by my studio guest, Mr. Kenneth Hendrik Kusab, Deputy Director for Wildlife Monitoring and Research within the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism. And he's here to help us unpack Namibia's efforts on protecting wetlands through indigenous knowledge. Now, you too can be part of this conversation by following the discussion on our social media platforms, where we are currently streaming this show live. On Facebook, we are at the Government Information Center, and as well as on YouTube, if you are a YouTuber, that is. Our handle there is the Government Information Center, pardon me. And Mr. Kusab, as we continue with our conversation here in the studio, for many communities, wetlands are not just ecosystems, right, as you clearly indicated earlier, but a source of daily living, right? Yeah. Can you perhaps share how wetland conservation support the livelihoods, especially for communities that are living near such ecosystems?
Yes, for many years, or over the years, local communities sort of co-evolve with these wetlands. Their lifestyles, their cultural practices, their traditions are linked to these wetlands. And that is actually the theme of the World's Wetlands Day celebration this year. Basically recognizing the role of local communities in wetland conservation. You know, when we talk about conservation, most of the time we talk about conservation being the role of the government only.
Right.
But then with this theme, we are trying to emphasize the fact that conservation is not only the responsibility of the government, but it's also
shared responsibility
of the local communities, because they have been there living with these resources or alongside these resources even before these governments were formed. So their traditional knowledge systems are linked to these wetland resources. For example, communities depend on fisheries for their protein, source of protein is fish. Fish is also an important economic activity. It brings much needed economic resources to the local economy. So it's very important from that perspective. These wetland systems, like I mentioned before, are also important tourism draw cards. So if tourism opportunities and activities are developed around these wetlands, it means employment for our Namibians. It means income generation for the broader local communities. So that's how wetlands are important, not just as economic activities or as water resources, but also as sources of food. You know, recently there were newspaper articles about the potential threats that bullfrogs, for instance, are facing through overutilization, and that there is no sort of government agency responsible for their conservation or their regulation. So bullfrogs, for instance, is an important resource that is linked to wetlands. So communities traditionally had ways of managing these resources to make sure that they are not over-harvested, they're harvested in a sustainable manner. So the highlight of today is to bring about those traditional practices to the front so that we can jointly help enforce those traditional practices with modern conservation techniques to make sure that these resources are protected.
Hence, indigenous knowledge.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Tlisa. You are teaching, we are learning from this conversation, and I'm sure I'm not only speaking on my behalf, but on many other Namibians that are tuned in right now into this episode. As we continue with our discussion, Mr. Tlisa, what role does research and wildlife monitoring play in informing wetland management and policy decisions?
Thank you. I think generally research and monitoring is a vital function.
Absolutely.
It's always overlooked at some places, but it's a very important function because it provides us with the information that we need.
Much needed, actually.
Yes, to inform the management of our resources. And this can be anything from wildlife down to these unique ecosystems that we call wetlands.
Right.
So wetlands are very vulnerable ecosystems. Therefore, we need to know whether their ecological integrity is maintained or if there's any changes that requires intervention. That's why we use monitoring most of the time, looking mainly at, like I mentioned before, or as I mentioned before, on the water quality, because that's a good indicator. It gives you an indication if the water is suitable or is in good condition to allow some form of aquatic life to persist.
Right.
And then the second monitoring tool that we use is the status of the bird species that are making use of these wetlands. So those are the two monitoring techniques that we are using. There is not so much research being done in Namibia on the wetlands, but there has been some long-term monitoring activities on these wetlands, some of it spanning over a period of 44 years plus. Records that are being available for some of these important wetlands. So all of that information fits into the management planning. And like I said, most of these important wetlands are located within protected areas.
Right.
And this protected area management planning is informed by this monitoring information. And based on that monitoring information, these management plans are designed, and in their designation, they sort of provide a special category of protection for these wetlands. So that's how the monitoring data and data from the research activities feeding into the management and protection of these wetlands.
All right.
But there is quite a lot that needs to be done for the wetlands that are not listed as Ramsar sites.
Okay.
They are important wetlands, important for local communities, important for the migratory bird species. So there is quite a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm using this platform then to call upon the public and also citizen science to join hands with the ministry and then to work together with us to help monitoring these important wetlands.
Right. Thank you. We're shifting gears to international agreements. It is important to understand that how Namibia aligns locally with global standards, right? How does Namibia align its wetland conservation efforts with international obligations under the Ramsar Convention?
Thank you. Namibia is doing quite well. Since we listed our those 5 Ramsar sites, or let me say 4 Ramsar sites were listed just after independence. And since then, none of them have lost their sort of status as a healthy Ramsar site. We have Ramsar sites all over the world that are losing their status,
Right.
and they get placed on what is called the Montrex record. That is almost like a blacklist. It's an indication that these wetlands have lost their ecological character,
Right.
and they are not the same, or they don't have the same conditions. So none of our listed Ramsar sites have lost their ecological character. They still remain the same. Of course, there are a lot of pressures around them, but luckily they are still fine, and they still continue to perform those ecological functions. So Namibia also, as a party to the Ramsar Convention, participate actively in the Ramsar Convention activities. We attend those conference of the parties, and we also participate in the activities of the convention.
Right.
Namibia recently, with the Southern Africa countries, established what is called the Southern African Ramsar Regional Initiative.
Okay.
That's the idea, to bring the Southern African countries together to then, at the sub-regional level, work together to promote wetland conservation and sustainable use. So Ramsar Convention and our approach is not just about a strict protection of this wetland or Ramsar sites. It's about sustainable use, because we appreciate the fact that communities depend on these wetland resources. So there's no way through protection we can exclude local communities and resource users from these wetlands. So the convention is all about supporting and promoting sustainable use.
Right. Now, looking on the positive side of things, despite the dry spells, there have been notable milestones worth celebrating for our country. Are there any success stories or notable progress that Namibia has made in wetland protection over the recent years?
Yes, we have all the Ramsar sites that are listed. There is some sort of a management planning system in place for them. Since they are all forming part of these protected areas,
right.
They are managed as integral part of those protected areas. So they are well protected. Some of these wetlands are also used for sustainable tourism purposes.
Right.
They contribute to revenue or income generation for the state and also for the local communities. So those are some of the notable achievements that I can highlight when it comes to wetland conservation in Namibia. We have active community of citizen scientists that help monitor these wetlands. Some of these long-term monitoring data sets have been contributed by private citizens who work with the government. So we have this approach where local communities or stakeholders work jointly with the government to help look after these important wetland resources. We have traditional authorities in some parts of Namibia that also regulate access to these wetland resources and how these resources can be used. Of course, sometimes some of these wetland resources are temporary,
Right.
and sometimes people try to get the maximum out of these resources before they sort of disappear with the waters. So sometimes there is a little bit of situation where because of the opportunity that people can make money out of this,
Right. They
that
overdo.
sometimes they overdo
Right.
and overplay the rules and traditional practices that are at place.
All right.
But then one thing that stands out for Namibia is that there is that collaboration with the government and the local communities in how we manage resources. So when we talk about wetland resources, I mentioned earlier that it's not just our ministry which is responsible.
Right.
We have ministry responsible for fisheries, for instance, working with local communities to set up and establish what is called the fisheries reserves. So these fisheries reserves are also on these important wetland areas. So communities looking after fisheries helps to look after the wetland as the whole ecosystem. So and all of this work that we are doing, like wetland conservation, fisheries conservation, they are all backed by legal systems and processes
In place.
Yeah, so it's not sort of activities where there is no legal provision. So from our side, there is community-based natural resource management. Fisheries has got those fisheries reserves. Water affairs has got what we call this integrated water resources management, setting up basin management committees, and they all work together to support wetland conservation. So that is, I think, something that stands out for Namibia. So it's a kind of a multi-stakeholder approach for unified unified outcome.
Right. And of course, also the benchmarking with other nations that are as well having this very unique, ecosystems. And you've earlier on also mentioned the Southern Africa Ramsar kind of community. I think that also helps because you are benchmarking, learning best practices from other nations that have this unique ecosystems.
Yeah.
We appreciate the work that your directorate or your ministry is doing,
Thank
or the
you.
government through your ministry is doing, rather. Now, Mr. Tlisa, at the same time, I know that there were success stories that we just mentioned now. At the same time, we know that conservation is an ongoing process, right? It doesn't just, you don't like put a stop to it. It's an ongoing process from generations to generations. And there is always room for improvement. Talk to us about the gaps that still exist, that you've identified that still exist in wetland data, monitoring or enforcement, and how can they be addressed?
Thank you. I just want to agree with you. I think conservation is a generational activity. Even our constitution makes provision for that intergenerational equity. So whatever we do with our resources today must be done in a manner that the generation that would come after us would also benefit from the same resources in the same way we were benefiting. So, and that is the mandate that our ministry is also trying to take forward. Of course, there are challenges with wetland resources, wetland management, wetland monitoring. I think the biggest challenges always come down to financial resources and staff availability.
Right.
Of course, I mentioned that our ministry works with the Ministry of Agriculture
Right.
and civil society, so they help fill those gaps. So we work together in a partnership, collaborative approach to fill those gaps. Monitoring, expanding or extending the monitoring networks to other important wetlands, that is also a gap that we have. So as a ministry, we are sort of prioritizing and focusing primarily on the listed Ramsar sites, but there are also other wetlands that meets the criteria that are also important globally and also locally. But then due to lack of resources, we are not yet able to expand our monitoring efforts to those Ramsar or potential Ramsar sites.
Okay.
So what we need is then more active collaboration with the local communities and citizen scientists. These are now Namibians that are interested and excited about wetland conservation to come on board and work with the ministry to fill those gaps.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, looking ahead, I think we both agreed earlier on that the responsibility to protect wetlands doesn't solely lie with government, but it's a shared responsibility. Government and, of course, for a lack of a better word, so government and the communities within which these ecosystems, are. How can young people, researchers, and local communities actively contribute to wetland conservation efforts? That is already in place, like we've earlier on mentioned, government, and of course that of your ministry. But we've agreed to say that there is room for improvement.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need young people, volunteers, to come on board. We are lucky in Namibia. We have very high literacy rates.
Right.
We have every year we have young people that are either matriculating or graduating from the university. Some of them are unemployed. Some of them are doing their own economic activities.
Right.
But we need young people to actively participate in wetland conservation. So at least once in a year, we do these Wetlands Day celebrations. We would like young people to be part of this process to celebrate and raise the profile of important wetlands in Namibia. Those that are at the university studying natural resources management, it's my call on them to take up courses or research activities that are related to understanding more about the wetlands. One thing that we don't know so much about the wetland is their economic value.
Right.
What does it mean for us to have a wetland? And what did it mean if those wetlands will disappear from us in terms of economics and local livelihoods? Those are kind of the studies that I would encourage young Namibians to take on and then to study, because their findings will also further inform and help the conservation policy making. And it will also help raise the profile of these wetlands in Namibia. You know, if you travel through northern Namibia, for instance, we have floodwaters that come in from Angola.
Right.
Some people see it as a problem because their crop fields or houses are flooded.
Right.
But then that's important source of water for many communities. It's used for watering livestock, it's used for crop production. So some communities depend on that water as the only source of water. So sometimes that water will last for the whole year, depending on the rainy season. Sometimes they will last for most of the year. So for that duration that water is available in those wetlands, communities do not have to suffer or don't suffer about access to water. So it's an important resource which we have to protect. Sometimes for us to protect the resource, we have to understand what is its value. What does it mean for us to have this resource? What will it cost us if we don't have this resource to have a similar services or resources? So those are basic studies that I would call upon the young Namibians to take on, and then to generate information that will then help the government and policy makers to make informed policy decisions about wetlands.
Right. Now, I'm in agreement with you with the water, like especially in the northern area of Namibia, right? I think it's quite important that we then educate the communities around the water from Angola, so that they know about water harvesting, so that they know how to best, utilize it, harvest it for a better tomorrow. Not only see it as a problem because now when it's, flooding, it may be perceived as such. But if this water is harvested, it can make tomorrow better.
Yeah.
As it can be used, of course, for crop production as well as for to feed the animals.
Yeah.
I mean, yes,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Mr. Kenneth, we are drawing closer to our discussion for this morning. However, I wanted to find out from you what I believe that it's quite important. I'm trying to see how best I can phrase this question, but let me give it a shot. How does your ministry perhaps ensures that locals or the locals understand the importance of wetland, right? And you've earlier on mentioned that there are measures put in place to protect them, but we are talking about, yes, we are lucky to have a literate kind of population, but I know that there are people in the villages that don't understand English, because I understand most of our productions are done in English. How do we, and we are emphasizing that it's indigenous, protecting wetlands through indigenous knowledge. How do we then incorporate these indigenous people who do not speak English to ensure that they also play their part and their role in protecting this very vital, natural ecosystem?
Yeah, no, the communities are actually the best custodians of natural resources, including water.
Absolutely.
Because they know that if there is no water, it means they have to move their livestock long distances to the nearest water. So they are the right custodians. And I like the theme of this year's Wetlands Day celebration of involving traditional knowledge and cultural systems in the wetland management. I think through the ministries like the Ministry of Agriculture, because they deal predominantly with water-related issues, and water-related issues directly affect local communities. There are a lot of structures that are put in place to bring local voice into wetlands and water resources management.
Right.
I think there is a policy directive from the government which is called the Integrated Water Resources Management.
Right.
So it brings all the stakeholders that are within these different river basins to come together and decide on the future and the current use of their wetlands and water resources. So that's how government is getting the local stakeholders involved in water resources and wetlands management.
Okay.
The ministry, our ministry and the Ministry of Agriculture also jointly commemorate World Water Day and World Wetlands Day, because these two resources are interlinked. So through those commemoration or joint commemoration, we jointly raise the profile of wetlands and water resources, and we communicate the importance of these resources to the public.
Right.
But then, as I indicated earlier, government has many ways of bringing local communities to
On
the
board.
table
Okay.
when it comes to water resources
All right.
and wetland resources management.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. We've come to the end of our discussion this morning, but I wouldn't want to let you go without asking for a message. What message do you have for the Namibians as we commemorate this World Wetland Day 2026?
Thank you. My message to the listeners and the viewers is straightforward. And it's linked to the theme of today's celebration, is to protect and sustain our wetlands. Because if our wetlands disappear, traditional and indigenous knowledges associated with these wetlands will also disappear. And that will rob the future generations from the knowledge that we are benefiting from today. That is my message.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Isaac. It's really very highly appreciated. We thank you so much for coming out here to come and educate us, to educate the Namibian nation on the importance of the wetlands. Indeed, they are unique ecosystems, and they are, it's very important to our country as a nation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to share this information with you and the viewers.
Thank you so much. Now, Namibia, as we conclude our discussion on this World Wetland Day commemoration, commemorated every year on the 2nd of February, it is clear that wetlands are far more than just waterlogged areas of land. They are life support systems for our environment, our wildlife, and our communities. Protecting them requires not only government action, but the involvement of every Namibian, guided by both science and rich indigenous knowledge that has sustained these ecosystems for generations. On behalf of the Government Information Center, I today would like to encourage all Namibians to take part in this very important notion of protecting our wetland. And above all, happy World Wetland Day, Namibia. From myself, Hileni Philippa and the entire GIC production crew, until next time, take care.